Sonic has to be my favorite because everything in my career happened because of Sonic.
Yeah.
If Sonic hadn't happened, so many doors.
Do you mind talking about that progression? How did that happen?
Not at all.
How did that work?
You know, I worked on I hadn't done anything big at all, and then I did a small part on this. Oh, in fact, I forget what it was. I was cast as a lead character in some anime, but then they decided to take it away from me because they're like, well, Jason's never done this before, so he's probably not ready for this type of work, you know?
What?
So instead they gave me a little part on another anime, and the director of that show, a man by the name of Bill Timoney, who I always thank for my career every time I see him, Bill said, you know what? Fox is casting their Saturday morning lineup for cartoons next week, and you should really get into audition. And so I got my agent to give me an audition. I went in really excited, and I auditioned for this show that I did not even get a call back for, called Shaman King. And I thought kind of like, all right, well, that was fun. You know, at least I got to try and whatever. And like very much to my surprise, the next week they called me in for Sonic. And I was like, oh, well, what is the, you know, having come from just like less than a month ago of almost getting a lead in some obscure anime that I can't even remember the name of, and then having it taken away because I wasn't, you know, they didn't think, you know, I had done enough to to do this. I'm like, what are the chances I'm going to book like Sonic, you know? So I go in, I read for it. I didn't think it went well at all. And so I left. And then like a couple days later, very much to my surprise, I get a call back. And I'm like, what? Like, how is this? You know, are they just being nice? You know? Yeah. So I go in and they wanted to do a callback because I had auditioned for Sonic with a different voice. But then there was another character called Chris in the show that I auditioned for with the voice, which eventually became Sonic's. And the producer said, can you try that? Just switch the voices. And I was like, sure. So I did the Chris voice for Sonic. I left and again thought, well, that's the last I'm going to hear about that. Well, at the time I was working in my agent's office, like making petty cash for answering phones, you know, sending faxes, really dating myself, you know, no internet at this time. And the craziest thing is that I answered the phone when the studio called to book me. And I couldn't tell them it was me or anything. So, you know, it's like, you know, Frontier Booking, how can I help you? Yes, Jason Griffith came in to audition last week for the role of Sonic the Hedgehog. And I was like, oh, great. I get to hear the rejection firsthand, you know? And I was like, oh, yes, Jason. Yes, I'm familiar. And they said, yes, we'd like to book him next Wednesday for the role of Sonic the Hedgehog. Well, dude, this is not what I was expecting at all, you know? So I sort of fell out of the chair a little bit. I wrote down the appointment details and everything. And then, you know, had to convince not only my agent, but like my friends and cousin and everyone like that. I'd really like, everyone's like, no, you didn't book that. You're lying. Stop lying, gosh, dude, you know?
That's awesome.
And so I just, you know, I started going in and recording. And I think in the beginning, every session was just filled with dread of like, oh man, I'm not going to keep this job. I'm going to get fired, you know, because back then I was so new that I would get direction. Oh, try it this way. And I would take it as criticism. So every time I get direction, I'm like, oh, I hate what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then finally that sort of went away. And, you know, it was just years of being able to work on that show. And then they brought me in for other characters and I booked Shadow. I booked Jet. And then 4 Kids was the studio. And then they had like 7 or 8 different shows happening all at once. And so another show would bring you another show. They did One Piece. Yep. One Piece was the second show that I worked on there. And they, you know, either you would audition for those shows or they would they'd be like, we know you can do this. Like I remember working on Pokemon when it was still at 4 Kids, and they had a character named Brawly. And they're like, we want him to be like a surfer dude, you know? So I did like surfer dude kind of guy, you know? And I'm thinking to myself, and I even asked the director, I'm like, but you know, you have the guy that plays Michelangelo from the Turtles. Why didn't you ask him to do this? And they're like, well, because he's Michelangelo from the Turtles. So then we need something different, you know? So yeah, I mean, it was just, again, it was like a snowball effect. One after another, people would just bring you in and like branch off into different studios, and they bring you to those studios. And it was like, you know, I stayed loyal to a couple different like ideals in my life. It was just like show up on time or earlier, be easy to work with, be directable, and, you know, and have fun, you know, because that was the thing. It was like I had to teach myself how to have fun because I like my whole life I just took everything so seriously.